Welcome to episode 68 of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about blogging. Now, occasionally I bring up this subject because it's near and dear to my heart as a blog educator. I have a course where I teach people how to start a blog completely from scratch and basically walk them through the journey that it took for me to get my blog as a full-time income. The same path that several of my other students have been able to do to also create a full-time income from their blog. So on occasion, I like to talk about that part of my life. If you have an entrepreneurial spirit, then this episode is definitely one for you. I'm going to be talking about the 4 mistakes that new bloggers tend to make and how to avoid them.
My name is Lisa, mom of 6 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. Join me as I share with you my love for creating a handmade home from scratch cooking and a little mom and entrepreneur life along the way.
Today's episode is sponsored by my course, Create Your Blog Dream. It has been 2 years since I first launched my course, and it has been an amazing journey. I've seen students come on board and go completely full-time or full-time income with their blogs in that amount of time. As part of the 2-year anniversary, I've been doing a lot of revamping. So there are several new videos as things have been updated. Few things have changed over the last 2 years. And I'm also launching a webinar. So this will be a free training. If you want to start your own blog, it's an hour-long training where I am going to be teaching you everything you need to know to start a blog. You can sign up to get on the wait list to be the first one to know whenever I launch my free blogging masterclass webinar by visiting bit.ly/farmhouse blogging. That's bit.ly/farmhouse blogging. Even if you're just curious about what all blogging entails, you can sit in on the webinar and see if it would be a fit for you, if it's something that you want to add to your life or possibly not. But I do invite you to join us. All right, so in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the 4 mistakes that new bloggers make. I made them. Likely you're going to make them, very possibly, but I live to tell the tale, and failure is just a part of any endeavor. I have failures all the time, just like last week whenever I was recipe testing for my new sourdough pumpkin roll. I made it 4 times before I got it right. And one time I did something as silly as forgetting the baking soda. So it was like a flat pancake. The other 3 times it was adjusting a few other tweaks here and there. And when you see a polished recipe on the blog with this pretty pumpkin roll, just know that it was not like it just popped out of the oven and looked beautiful. It definitely took a lot of testing. And even still, I'm not 100% sure that I love the photos that I ended up getting, but I can promise you that the cake is delicious. So we're going with it. All right. So that actually leads me into mistake number 1, which is perfectionism. I find that people get really, really stressed out about details that don't exactly matter or that don't move the needle very much. So for an example, the name of the blog. Sometimes people don't start their blog for 3 years just because they're worried about the name. Now, most people probably aren't on that end of the spectrum of 3 years, but still, you don't need to worry and stress about the name for months on end. It's better just to think of something. I mean, of course, a good blog name is good, so give it a week or 2 of thought, maybe less if you're really wanting to get going, but give it some thought. But if after a little while you haven't came up with a name, just go for it. So for a little personal story, I actually, when I started my blog, named it Ruthie Bell Home. And that was the domain I bought in December of 2015. And as you know, that is not the name of my blog, because with my original plan, the whole reason I started a blog was I had an Etsy shop called Ruthie Bell, which was just named after my first child. I started that Etsy shop when I was like 24. So Ruth was my only child at the time. And so as a first-time mom, what do? You just name things after your child because that's what your world centers around. So I started my blog because I thought, you know what? If I start creating content and reach an audience, then maybe more people will buy things from my Etsy shop. And so that was kind of the plan, was that I would use my blog to promote my physical products. As things started to morph, I realized that there was a lot more opportunity in other areas of blogging that didn't have anything to do with my Etsy shop, but it was all a process and a learning experience. And I'm really glad that I got started even though I had to switch my domain name, even though somewhere in the middle of it, I switched from Squarespace over to WordPress, I'm really glad that I just kept going. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And even though sometimes it was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it did push me ahead, because what you'll find is that sometimes you can't even move forward without failing and starting, or starting and failing. It's the same thing with recipes. When I started that day, I was like, I don't really know exactly how to make a sourdough pumpkin roll. Maybe I'll try this. Okay, maybe I'll try this. And yeah, it would have been nice if I got it done in the first step. But in a week's time, it was totally done and I had it, and it just took a lot of failure. So mistake number 1 is definitely perfectionism. I also see it with logos. This is one of those funny things that I just notice a lot. People really get worried about their website, their logos. They want everything to look just perfect. But here's the thing. When you go to launch your blog, no one's going to read it. And so it doesn't have to be perfect. You should definitely just lead with good content rather than worrying about those little details. Of course, it's nice to see a pretty website, and that's all good, and it's all part of it. And I teach people in my course how to create a pretty website. But know that later on, when you're making a ton of money, you can always pay someone to redo your website. Let me just fill you in on something here, though. I still don't have a logo, and I still don't have a website that isn't just a basic template. I've never done it. I've never taken the extra step in time to get a logo or to have someone professionally design this beautiful website with all the bells and whistles. It's totally basic. So you can definitely make a really substantial income without worrying about those little details. Whenever I first started my blog, I picked 3 sort of neutral colors. So that way I knew I could grow into them. And they're still my colors today. I've never changed them. They really weren't given a whole lot of thought. I was like, well, a blue, a tan, a white, and a black. That way I can't really go wrong. And then I also chose a name, obviously after I switched from Ruthie Bell Home. I chose a name that I could grow into as well. So with my name, Farmhouse on Boone, I can write about a wide variety of things, really, because it's named after my home. So anything that goes on in my home, really, I can adjust the blog to. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you are struggling with a name, think of something. If you aren't totally sure what niche you're going to be in, maybe even after your own name is a good idea. I have lots of name suggestions in my course, but don't get hung up there. All right, mistake number 2 is procrastination. This one's a lot like the perfectionism one. There's a tendency when you start something like blogging to have what some people refer to in the industry as imposter syndrome. And this is where you overthink things and wonder if you really have anything good to offer. The more that you think about something and procrastinate, the less of a good idea it seems like. I still do this to this day. So when I first started my blog, it was especially hard because I thought, no one's going to see this. No one's going to care. I thought things like, this has already been done. And now I have an audience of people who, when I release a blog post, I can instantly get readers on it. But I still have that happen where I think, is this something anybody even wants to read? Like, for example, last week, I did a post on how to halter train a calf because I have my dairy cow, or future dairy cow. She's just a heifer right now, Bessie, and I halter trained her, and I'm committed to getting out 2 posts per week. I've done that from the beginning. It's what I do. And I didn't really have anything else for the week. I'd spent a lot of time doing other things, working on the homestead, feeding my kids, all that kind of stuff. And so all I really had was the experience of halter training Bess. And I was like, nobody's really going to care about this. But I just did it anyway. And I didn't overthink it because I needed to get out a blog post. It's the experience I had. And just from doing this now for almost 5 years, it wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody emails me in like 6 months and says, hey, I found you whenever I was looking to halter train my calf. You popped up on YouTube. Then I started watching all your sourdough videos. There's been so many times like that where somebody has reached out to me and said, oh, I found you through this. And I was like, oh, that? I never thought anybody would watch that or read that. And yet they did. So avoiding procrastination and just moving forward is a mistake that you could make, but you could also avoid. Another reason people tend toward procrastination is just the learning curve of blogging. You might not know it yet, but there's a lot that goes into blogging. If you've been blogging a little while, you probably already know that as soon as you think you've learned everything, there's something else to learn, and that's normal, and it's just part of it. What I usually recommend to people is to pick something small each week and just focus on that. After that week's over, you'll know it and you can move on to the next thing, but you don't need the weight of all of the future things on this week's self. You don't need that. So just don't let the overwhelming learning curve of starting a blog stop you. I know whenever I first started, I learned how to use social media platforms. Then I learned how to make pins and get the right kind of pins on Pinterest to get traffic. Then I learned how to shoot my camera in DSLR mode. Then I learned how to create video. It was always just little tiny baby steps. And it's actually the exact same thing with our house right now. Actually, this story lends itself well. Also, at the beginning of this week, the goal was to get a DIY, actually it was the beginning of last week because it's early in the week, but the goal was to get a DIY hearth pad completed for the installation of our wood stove and to document the process for YouTube and my blog. And at the beginning of the week, I had no clue what we were gonna do. I mean, I had ordered tile, so I knew that we were gonna be doing tile, but I didn't really know how to lay tile. And then I added on the step of wanting to do herringbone, which apparently is the most complicated tile project you can do. And I really started questioning myself, thinking, do we really want to do this? Maybe we should just hire someone and push off the project even longer because we'll have to wait for that person. And then I was like, you know what? But this is my blog post for the week. I have nothing else. And so we have to figure this out. So we started watching YouTube videos. We started laying the tile down. Every time we got to a step we didn't know, we researched and then we figured it out. And we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. By the end of the week, it took a lot of hours, probably more than it should have for the average tile layer person. We had a hearth pad, it was done, and today I'm looking at the wood stove installed on top of it because our wood stove guy was scheduled for today. You will find that anytime you just start moving and you focus on one thing at a time, like last week, that was our only project. I have a lot of things around this house I want to do, but all we did was that hearth pad. You will be amazed at how much you can get done over time. If you just add on, a week of this, a week of that, soon you'll know all there is to know about blogging. I mean, at this point, there's still more to learn, but for me, it's mostly just continuing education. Like as things change, I have to learn them, but I'm so much more confident about all the little aspects of blogging, but it was just little steps along the way. So the plan to avoid procrastination is to make a plan in your mind for your blogging journey to be long-term. So not 10 years total, but a 6-month plan, a 1-year plan, then a 3-year plan, and just commit to learning something new every week or every month. Designate this month for learning Pinterest and don't worry about that you don't know Instagram or Facebook. Also, don't compare your year 1 to somebody else's year 4. I struggle with this in every area of my life. We all do, I think, as women for the most part. Comparison is a trap. If you are just beginning, you should network with bloggers who are also just beginning. You guys can share each other, you can do blog groups and rise to the top as bloggers together and learn from each other and grow together. But don't look at someone like Miss Mustard Seed, who's been blogging for 10 years, or Liz Marie, and think, oh, I'll never be there. Because you're comparing their year 10 to your year 1, and it's just not fair to yourself to do that. So you don't ever have to match someone else's success. And of course, you're comparing something that someone has been working on late nights for years to your just beginning, and you'll get there too. Okay, my last tip for avoiding procrastination is commit to a certain number of hours per week to work on your blog. So it could be that every night after your kids go to bed between 7 and 9, you're going to work on your blog. And in a year, those hours are going to accumulate to over 700 hours. So if you have 2 hours every night, 365 days in a year, I'm giving you a few days off there because there's 15 days off there. That will put you at 700 hours of effort towards your blog. And that didn't require you to be on your phone all day, to neglect your children, neglect your husband. It only really required 2 hours. So you can see how if you commit to even a small amount of time, but you do it every single day, it will turn into something big. The third mistake that I see new bloggers making is writing about personal things too soon or things that don't really appeal to a wider audience. Now, once your blog grows and you have a core group of maybe 1,000 followers or just some people who are interested in your blog, then you have the room to write about something really personal because you have a base of people who really care. I mean, I am still at the point where I like to make content that can be searched on Google or YouTube. But if I do something like a personal story and I promote it out to people, I will get readers on it. In the beginning, the question that you need to ask yourself before making a blog post is, Does this answer a problem for somebody? Is it entertaining? What can it offer someone else? Is it informational, educational? Does it solve a problem? Is it funny? Always think about who you're writing for and not really what you want to write. I know that a lot of times we think, okay, if I'm interested in this, everybody else is interested in this also. But the way to really grow your blog is to create what people are already looking for. And again, I go over that in my course, in my webinar as well, on how to figure out what it is that people are searching for so that you can make sure that you are developing the kind of content that will grow your readers so that later you can maybe shift a little bit to writing more about what you want to write about. All right, mistake number 4, and I wrote a blog post on the 3 biggest mistakes bloggers make a few years ago, and it didn't include this 4th one, but I've since learned that this is a big one, and it's not just that new bloggers make it, a lot of bloggers make this mistake, and it is focusing on the wrong things. So when I sit down to my computer, let's say that Daniel is down for a nap, which right now he is, and I have this magical little hour where I'm alone, which doesn't happen much. Is that the time to be checking emails? Yes, I need to check emails. That's something that I have to do. It's a duty of my blog. It's something that I'm required to do at least once a week. I need to filter through all my emails, answer the people who have reached out to me, any sponsorships, things like that. Is it the time to edit video? Not really. I can edit video when the house is loud. Is it the time to sit down to one of the third-party sponsorship apps and apply for every brand sponsorship that is available? No. Okay, so what I have found is that you really, if you want to take blogging seriously, is you need to prioritize your day and always have a list of what has to happen to move your blog forward. Anything beyond that, you can squeeze in different times of the day or possibly later in the week. But early in the week, if you're committed, for example, to writing out 2 blog posts every single week, and that's your goal, no matter what, early in the week, make the recipe, photograph, write, do all of those things that you're going to get that content out. And then by the end of the week, let's say you've committed 2 hours a day to growing your blog. If you still have hours at the end of the week, you can use that to learn Pinterest or make a few Pinterest graphics or something like that. But get the important work done at the beginning of the week so that there's no excuse to not get out fresh content. Because ultimately with blogging, that is what is going to move the needle. That is what is going to grow your audience, get more readers to your blog, is putting out content. So whatever that is for you, if you're a woodworking blog, some kind of furniture build, if you're a fitness blog, some kind of, I'm not a fitness person, so I don't even know, but training thing, make a commitment on how many posts you're going to do per week and don't put it off. Don't focus on the wrong things earlier in the week and feel like you're working, because if you really feel like you're doing something, if you are redoing your website, I find people do that all the time. It's like, look at my new website. Don't make a new website. Just get out posts on your old junky website. And then later in the week, you could spend some time, if you have time, working on that website. But put the most important things first and foremost, focus on those, and then fill in the rest of the time with some of those other things that are important, but just not nearly as important, because consistency is key with blogging. You don't want to post, for 4 months straight and then just give up. That is what causes some people's blogs to be really successful and some to never really go anywhere. Consistency. And it can be done even with just a few hours per week if you always focus on the right things and not the fluffy things that make you feel like you're doing something but actually aren't doing much at all. So for my little example, right now Daniel's sleeping and I have it on my list today that I need to get a podcast episode recorded because it's my goal to get out 1 podcast per week. Now earlier in the year when I was doing this podcast, I was getting out 3 and 2, and now I'm trying to launch my new webinar. All I can manage is 1, and it has to be quiet. You don't want to hear my kids in the background when I'm doing a podcast. Well, I was tempted when I sat down here at my computer to start working on something else, which is I just bought some new photo presets, and I've never added a preset to my Lightroom. So it's on my list today to figure out how to add my new presets to Lightroom. That's just one of my little tasks on the Tuesday list of tasks. So I sat down on my computer, and What do you think sounds more fun to me, recording a podcast or fiddling around with Lightroom? Well, in case it isn't obvious, fiddling around with Lightroom or posting to Instagram or answering Instagram DMs. Those are all much more mindless jobs. And so, of course, naturally, that is where, we always want to do the easiest thing. That's where I want to go. I want to sit down and just play around with my Lightroom presets. But that is not the most important thing for today. I could post all pictures from here until forever that don't have Lightroom presets on them, and nobody will really care. It's just for me because they're prettier and I want my feed to be prettier, which is great, but it's way more important that I get this podcast out. So there's an example, and I still struggle with it, is to focus on the hardest things first, the most important things first. Likely it's the task that you least want to do. That's what you should do. And if you just push yourself each time a little bit, it'll get easier and easier to start prioritizing what's important. All right, well, I hope that this is helpful. If you want to start a blog, then these are some mistakes to avoid. Make sure to get your name on the list for my upcoming free 1-hour webinar where I will teach you how to start a blog. You can get on the list by going to bit.ly/farmhouse blogging. That's bit.ly/farmhouse blogging. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast.